I didn't mean to end up in the desert. Honestly, it was supposed to be a drive to clear my head. Just a few hours on the open road, alone with my thoughts and a playlist full of memories I hadn't sorted through in years. But somewhere between the exit signs and the silence, I took a wrong turn. The gas gauge hit empty faster than I expected, and before I knew it, my phone lost signal, the engine sputtered out, and I was standing in the middle of nowhere. Sand stretching endlessly in all directions, no road in sight behind me anymore. Just heat, dust, and that hollow feeling that had followed me for months. The sun was melting into the horizon, casting long shadows across the landscape. My throat was dry, lips cracked, and the half-empty water bottle I'd been nursing all day had turned lukewarm and sour. I tossed the last drops down my throat and kept walking, hoping, praying, I'd find something, anything. The worst part wasn't the thirst or the sweat clinging to every inch of my skin. It wasn't even the ache in my legs or the sunburn I'd definitely be feeling later. It was the silence, a deep, crushing quiet that seemed to echo the space inside me. The part of me that had been unraveling ever since things fell apart. I'd left the city 2 days earlier, right after the breakup. 3 years of living with someone who once promised forever, and all it took was one confession. I don't love you the way you want me to. The job I'd been killing myself over? Laid off. Family? We hadn't spoken since the last Thanksgiving, where I came out and Mom's face folded in on itself like she'd tasted something rotten. I had nothing left to lose, which maybe explained why I kept walking long after my legs told me to stop. Why I didn't panic when I realized I might not make it to morning. There's a strange calm in knowing the worst has already happened. The desert just felt like a physical version of the place I'd been living in emotionally. Empty, dry, endless. At some point, I sat down on a rock, too exhausted to go any farther. The sky was shifting, warm gold fading into deep pinks and soft violets, and a breeze picked up, still hot, but kinder somehow. I leaned back, closed my eyes, and let my mind drift. For a second, I thought I heard hooves. A rhythmic sound, soft and distant. Probably just my brain trying to fill in the silence. But when I opened my eyes, I saw it. A shape, far out in the shimmer of dusk. At first it looked like a mirage, the kind of thing you expect when your body's on the edge of collapse. A man on horseback. Tall. Still. Watching me. I blinked. Still there. The shape moved slowly toward me, deliberate, steady. As it came closer, I could make out the curve of a wide-brimmed hat. The line of a worn jacket flapping with the wind. Boots, dusty but strong. Hit the ground as he dismounted and began walking the last few steps toward me. I stayed seated, unsure if I should run or cry or ask for help or apologize to the universe for all the stupid choices that led me here. Then he spoke. "You lost, stranger?" His voice was low and smooth, like honey stirred into whiskey. Familiar. Too familiar. I swallowed hard and looked up, the fading sunlight casting a soft glow behind his shoulders like something out of a dream. My heart thudded once, hard, because I knew that voice. That voice used to whisper in my ear during high school bonfires, used to sing to me off-key in a rusted pickup truck parked by the lake. That voice once said, "I think I might be in love with you," under the stars, and then disappeared the day after graduation without a word. I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. He tilted his head slightly, studying me. A slow smile crept across his face, soft and knowing, like he was seeing a ghost he'd expected to stay dead. "It's really you," I said finally, the words barely a whisper. He nodded once. "I wondered if I'd ever see you again." The desert felt smaller suddenly, like the whole world had folded into this one impossible moment. The pain, the heat, the hopelessness. It all blurred at the edges as I looked at him. "It couldn't be," I whispered again. But it was. The horse ride was quiet. I swayed in the saddle, half from exhaustion, half from disbelief. His arms were strong around me, one hand loosely gripping the reins, the other lightly pressed against my waist to keep me steady. The sun had dipped below the horizon now, leaving a muted orange glow in its place. Long shadows stretched over the desert floor like fingers trying to pull us back. I could feel his breath on the back of my neck, steady and calm, like the man himself. He hadn't said much after recognizing me, just offered his hand and helped me up onto his horse like it was the most natural thing in the world, like no years had passed between us. like we hadn't been ripped apart by time and silence. As the horse trotted toward the edge of the valley, the land began to shift, dry brush giving way to fence lines, a barn, and eventually a small, crooked house tucked under the slope of a low ridge. It wasn't much. Tin roof, chipped white paint, screen door barely hanging on. But something about it made my chest tighten. It looked lived in, like someone had made peace here. He helped me down with practiced ease, his fingers warm as they steadied my arms. I tried not to look at his face too much, but it was hard not to. The jawline I remembered was sharper now, stubbled and weathered by sun. His eyes, though, they were exactly the same, that same shade of brown, soft with a rim of gold when the light hit them just right. Inside, the house smelled like cedar and dust. The floor creaked under my boots, and I felt suddenly out of place, like a ghost walking through someone else's life. He led me into a small kitchen with a cracked tile counter and set a glass of water in front of me. I drank it too fast. He refilled it without saying a word. Then finally, he leaned against the sink, arms crossed, and said it low and without judgment. "You look like hell." I laughed, not because it was funny, but because the honesty hit so hard it cracked something open in me. "Feels about right." He nodded, then looked down at the floor like he didn't know what to say next. I took the chance to study him more. The curve of his shoulders, the faint scar on his neck I'd forgotten about, the way his hat now hung on a nail by the door. He looked like someone who belonged here, and I realized how long it had been since I felt like I belonged anywhere. "You recognized me?" I asked quietly. He looked up. Right away. I chewed the inside of my cheek. "It's been years." "8, he said. "But who's counting?" We both smiled, but it didn't last. The silence stretched out again, heavy, like we were both afraid of what would happen if we opened the door to the past too wide. "You look different," I finally said. He shrugged. "So do you. But underneath it, nah. I still see him." I didn't know what to say to that. My hands wrapped around the glass tighter. "Back then," I began slowly, "I wasn't sure if you really meant it. The way you kissed me." He turned his head, eyes narrowing just a little. "You think I would have kissed you like that if I didn't?" I lowered my gaze. "I don't know. We were young, scared, hiding all the time. I thought maybe it was just curiosity." He stepped forward, pulling out a chair across from me and sitting down like the air had gotten too heavy to stand in. "Do you remember the night we went out to the lake?" he asked. I nodded. That memory lived in my bones. "You said you liked how the stars didn't judge." He smiled faintly. "And you said the water felt like a secret." We both laughed quietly at that, but there was sadness laced in it too, the kind that comes from knowing a chapter ended before the story was done being written. "I kissed you that night," he continued, "on purpose. Not curiosity, not confusion. I knew exactly what I was doing. But then you left," I said, the words sharper than I meant. He looked away, his jaw clenched. "I didn't have a choice. That's bull. You could have called, written, anything." "I was scared," he said, voice low, "of what people would say, of what my dad would do. I thought if I stayed, I'd ruin your life too." I swallowed hard. "I would have gone with you," I said. He looked up, and there it was, that ache, that old hollow ache that I used to see in his eyes every time we said goodbye in secret. "I didn't know that," he said. "Well, now you do." The weight of everything we didn't say back then settled between us like dust on an old photograph. I wondered how much of my life would have changed if he had stayed. If we'd stayed. "I never stopped thinking about you," I admitted, my voice barely more than a whisper. He blinked, and I could see the tension in his shoulders soften. "Me neither." The words hung there, raw and real. There was so much more I wanted to say, ask, yell. But all I could do was sit there, staring at the man I'd once loved. The man who'd left me behind and yet still lived in the corners of my memory like a song I couldn't stop humming. Outside, the wind picked up and rattled the screen door. Night was falling fast, wrapping the ranch in darkness. But inside, for the first time in years, I didn't feel so lost. And neither did he. The shower was old, the kind with unpredictable water pressure and one of those squeaky knobs that protested with every turn. But standing under the lukewarm stream, rinsing off desert sweat and sand, I felt more human than I had in weeks. He'd handed me a towel and a clean t-shirt without saying much, just pointed to the bathroom and said, "Take your time." His voice was even, but I caught the way his eyes lingered on mine. Not hungry, not even curious, just present, like he was still trying to figure out if I was real. The shirt he gave me was his soft cotton, worn thin in places, the collar stretched just slightly. Smelled like sun, hay, and soap. I ran my fingers along the faded logo on the chest. McAllister Ranch. So that was his last name now. Funny, I never knew it back then. We never used them when we were alone. When I walked back into the main room, his eyes traveled over me. Slow and calm, like he was checking to make sure I was okay, or still there. "Feel better?" he asked. "Like a new man." He nodded toward the screen door. "Come sit." The porch creaked under our weight as we settled into two wooden chairs that overlooked a quiet expanse of desert. The last traces of dusk had given way to a sky full of stars. Out here, the darkness wasn't scary. It was peaceful, honest. We sat there for a while in silence. Crickets chirped. A breeze stirred the dry grass. Then, casually, he leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "I gave you a place to rest," he said, voice low and teasing. "What will you give me?" My head snapped toward him, and a slow smile spread across my face. I knew that line. Back in high school, we used it as a joke. Our way of saying "kiss me" without having to say it. We'd trade favors under the bleachers, in locker rooms, behind trees at the edge of the field. "I gave you my jacket. What will you give me?" "I helped you study. What will you give me?" It was our code, our secret. I didn't answer him right away. Just let my smile widen and leaned back into the chair, letting the silence do the talking. He looked over at me and chuckled softly. "You remember. I never forgot." His eyes didn't leave mine. Neither did I. For a long time we just sat there. Two silhouettes in the desert night, lit by nothing but starlight and old feelings. And then we started talking. Really talking. About the years in between. About where I went after he disappeared. College, heartbreak, jobs that paid the bills but never felt like home. He told me about his father's passing, how he'd inherited the ranch, how quiet things got out here, how it was lonely, sure, but simple, real. He never said whether he'd been with anyone else. Neither did I. It didn't seem to matter. What mattered was the space between us, once filled with fear and uncertainty, now softened by time and truth. "I used to dream about this," I said quietly. "Not the desert part. Just you. Showing up somewhere. Saying you never forgot." He looked at me, and there was something in his eyes I hadn't seen before. Not just desire. Not just memory. But hope. "I didn't," he said, "forget. I just thought. Maybe you had." I shook my head. "Never." He reached for the old tin kettle beside him and poured 2 mugs of coffee. Black and strong. Handed me one. Our fingers brushed for just a second, but it was enough to make the air shift. "I thought about writing to you," he said, staring out at the horizon. "So many times. I'd sit down with a pen, but the words felt too small. Too late." "It's not too late," I said. He turned toward me, searching my face. "You sure?" I nodded. And for a while after that, we didn't talk. Just drank our coffee and listened to the wind. It wasn't awkward. It was easy, the way it used to be when we'd sneak away from parties and lie in the bed of his truck, staring up at the same sky. Eventually, he stood. "You look tired." I was, but more than that, I was warm. Safe. I didn't feel like a man who'd just survived a near-death walk through the desert. I felt like someone who'd come home. He led me down the hall to the guest room. Small, cozy, clean. As I stepped inside, I turned to thank him again, but he was already standing in the doorway, watching me. There was something about the way he looked at me. Steady, unreadable, like he was waiting for permission to say something he'd been holding back for years. I didn't speak. Neither did he. The silence stretched. Not tense, just thick with everything unsaid. I took a step toward him, just one. Enough. His breath caught, barely audible. I wanted to kiss him. God. I wanted to feel his hands on me again. To fall back into the way we used to be. Skin and heat and soft gasps in the dark. But not yet. Not like this. Instead, I reached out and touched his wrist. He held still. "You should get some rest too," I said, my voice low. He nodded once, but didn't move. The look we shared then, it wasn't just lust. It wasn't just memory. It was everything we had been, and everything we might be again, trembling between us. Finally, he backed away. "Good night," he murmured. "Good night," I said, but my heart didn't want it to end. He turned, walked down the hall. I listened to the soft creak of floorboards as he disappeared behind his door. And then I lay down, pulling his shirt closer to my skin, and stared up at the ceiling, wide awake, every nerve alive with the question we both hadn't asked yet. What would happen tomorrow, if we let this become something again? The night was still, except for the occasional creak of wood settling in the cool air. I lay on the small guest bed, eyes open, watching the shadows play across the ceiling. Moonlight poured in through the thin curtains, soft and silver, painting everything in a gentle glow. The scent of cedar lingered in the room, mingling with the faint, familiar smell of him still clinging to the shirt I wore. Sleep wouldn't come. Not because I wasn't tired. My body ached from the desert, from the long day, from the weight of old memories made new again, but because my heart felt too full, too alert, like something was waiting, or maybe someone. I turned onto my side and stared at the door. And then, almost as if the thought itself had called him, it opened. Quietly, carefully. He stood there in the doorway, bare feet, jeans low on his hips, and a white t-shirt that clung to his chest like it had been dried in the sun. His hair was damp. He must have showered too. His eyes met mine in the low light, and he didn't speak. Neither did I. He stepped inside, letting the door close behind him with a soft click. "Can't sleep?" he asked. I shook my head. "Didn't think you'd still be awake." He gave a faint smile and moved closer, settling down on the edge of the bed. The mattress dipped under his weight. The room suddenly felt smaller, warmer. "I've been lying there," he said, thinking about that night at the lake. I sat up a little, pulling my knees to my chest, wrapping my arms around them. "The stars," I whispered. "And the way you looked at me when I said I was scared. You were trembling. I was afraid I'd lose you before I even had you." I smiled gently. "And now," he exhaled, slow and shaky. "Now I'm afraid it might be happening again." The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was thick with meaning, words we were too careful to say, feelings we didn't want to spill too fast. "You didn't lose me," I said quietly. "You left." He nodded, eyes downcast. "I did." I reached for his hand. Just a small movement. Just enough. His fingers met mine, warm, calloused, familiar in ways that made my chest ache. He looked up, and our eyes locked. There it was again. That question neither of us had asked out loud. "What are we doing?" I asked, not with fear but with wonder. He gave a soft laugh. "I think we're remembering." I let go of his hand and reached up instead, slowly, brushing his cheek with the backs of my fingers. He leaned into the touch, eyes fluttering shut, like he'd been waiting for it. "I used to dream about this," he whispered. "Coming back to you, touching you again, saying it out loud." "Saying what?" He opened his eyes. "That I still love you." The world paused. Everything stilled, the wind, the hum of night, even my breathing. "You still love me?" I asked. "I never stopped," he said. He reached for me then, slowly, respectfully, reverently. His hand cupped the side of my face, and I leaned into it, closing my eyes as his thumb brushed over my cheekbone. I felt him shift closer, until I could feel his breath on my lips, feel the weight of the years we'd missed pressing down between us. "Can I love you like I used to?" he asked, voice trembling with hope. I opened my eyes. "Yes." He kissed me, soft and slow, like he was rediscovering something sacred. His lips were warm, his hands steady behind my neck. I kissed him back, gently at first, then deeper, fuller, like my body had finally remembered what it felt like to be wanted without shame. We took our time. Every button, every layer, every inch of skin revealed was a memory, a flash of who we used to be and who we were now. He touched me with care, not lust, though the want was there, pulsing under every caress. But it wasn't just desire. It was something quieter, stronger, a kind of knowing that only comes from time and pain and longing. He undressed me like I was something precious, like each piece of clothing was a wall he was gently pulling down, not to take, but to see me, really see me, and I let him. because I wanted to be seen, because I wanted him, because in his touch I felt safe. Whole. When he pulled his shirt over his head, I ran my hands over his chest. Broader than I remembered, but still his. He shivered at my touch and I smiled. You still do that, I said. He looked down. Do what? Shiver. When you're nervous. Or when it matters. He nodded once. It matters. We lay down together, skin against skin, breath mingling in the stillness. There were no frantic movements, no rush, just hands exploring old paths, lips finding old rhythms, hearts sinking like they'd never been apart. He kissed my chest, my neck, my shoulder, like he was mapping a coastline he thought he'd lost. I wrapped my arms around him and let myself fall into the warmth, the rhythm, the memory made real. We moved together in the quiet of the night, every movement a conversation, every sigh a confession. It wasn't perfect, it was better, because it was real, honest, earned. When it was over, we didn't move. We just stayed there, tangled together in the moonlight. His arm draped over my chest, my fingers tracing lazy lines along his spine. The sound of our breathing filled the room, soft and steady. He kissed my temple. Thank you, he whispered. For what? For coming back. I turned to look at him, my fingers brushing his jaw. You found me. I think we found each other, he said. I smiled. Like we always do. Eventually, sleep crept in. The kind of sleep that only comes when you know, without question, that you're exactly where you're supposed to be. And in that quiet, with his heartbeat against my shoulder and his fingers still laced with mine, I closed my eyes and let go. Because for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I had to run. I felt home. The first light of morning crept in through the window, casting soft gold across the wooden floor and the tangled sheets. I blinked awake slowly, not because I was tired, but because I didn't want the moment to end. He was still beside me, one arm slung across my waist, breath warm against the back of my neck. I didn't move. I didn't want to wake him. I just lay there, listening to the quiet of the ranch, the distant sound of a rooster, the faint groan of wood as the sun began to heat the house. Peaceful. Still. His fingers shifted slightly, brushing my skin, and I smiled without meaning to. I turned carefully to face him. His eyes were open, watching me with a kind of sleepy softness that made my chest tighten. Morning, he said, voice rough with sleep. Hey! For a moment, we just stared at each other. No rush, no awkwardness. Just that gentle hum of two people who'd shared something real in the dark and woke up to find it still there in the light. You sleep okay? He asked. I nodded. Better than I have in a long time. He reached up, tucked a strand of hair behind my ear. The kind of touch that said more than words ever could. We didn't talk much as we got up. Just shared quiet smiles, brushing shoulders in the hallway, bumping hips in the bathroom. Felt familiar, easy, like stepping into an old routine that had been waiting for us to return. In the kitchen, he pulled out a carton of eggs and some leftover cornbread. I found mugs and poured coffee. We worked in rhythm, barely speaking, but everything about it felt full, comfortable, like the silence itself had shape and warmth. You always made the worst coffee, he said, smirking as he took a sip. You always ate it anyway. That's because I had a crush on you. I grinned. Had. He raised an eyebrow. Don't push it, city boy. We both laughed. That real kind of laugh, the one that shakes something loose inside you. He scrambled eggs while I cut the cornbread and tried not to stare at the way the sunlight lit up his arms, his neck, the soft stubble on his jaw. At the table, we talked about silly things. Music, weather, the names of the horses out back. Nothing heavy. Nothing that would break the spell. But eventually, it started to creep in. That quiet awareness that this wasn't forever. That time wasn't paused, only stretched. After breakfast, he disappeared into another room for a minute and came back holding something behind his back. Here, he said, setting them gently at my feet. Pair of boots. Brown leather, worn but clean. Not too scuffed. Sturdy. The right size. You always wore shoes too damn small, he said. These'll fit. I looked at him, then down at the boots, then back again. Are you giving me these? He shrugged. Consider it a trade. I gave you a place to rest. You gave me company. Fair deal. I bent down, ran a hand over the leather. They're nice. They're yours. It was more than a gift. It was a message, a gesture that said stay. Or at least remember me when you go. I stood slowly, holding the boots in my hands. My heart ached. I should get moving, I said softly. He froze. The light between us shifted. Oh, I've got things to figure out. Stuff I left behind. He nodded, but it was stiff. Controlled. Yeah, I get it. I walked over to the table, set the boots down gently, and leaned against the counter. I don't want to go, I admitted. But you still feel like you have to. I don't know where I belong anymore. He looked at me, really looked. Eyes wide open, no defense. And for the first time, I saw it. The fear. The longing. The way he was holding himself still, like if he moved too much, I'd vanish. I lost you once, he said, voice barely above a whisper. I don't want to lose you again. The words hit me like a wave, soft, but unstoppable. My throat tightened. I didn't come looking for you, I said, blinking hard. But maybe I was hoping something like this might happen. He nodded, slowly. Maybe I was hoping, too. We stood there for a while in that still kitchen, surrounded by sunlight and coffee mugs and all the words we didn't know how to say yet. I wanted to promise something, to give him a reason to believe I'd stay. But I was still scared. Not of him, but of what it would mean to stop running. He stepped closer, placing a hand gently on my chest. You don't have to decide today, he said. Just don't disappear again. Not without a word. I won't. And take the boots. I smiled, tears threatening at the edges of my vision. Okay. He leaned in and kissed my forehead. It was soft, lingering, more intimate than anything else we'd shared. You'll figure it out, he said. I believe that. I looked up at him, and for a brief second, I saw a different life. One where I stayed, where we fixed up the ranch together, where mornings looked like this every day. Felt so close I could almost touch it. Maybe I'm not ready to go, I said quietly. He raised an eyebrow. No, maybe I could stay. One more night. His smile was slow, warm, full of hope. Then I'll make sure the bed's warm. And this time we both knew we weren't going to lose each other again. The morning air was crisp, cooler than the desert should have allowed. I stepped out onto the porch barefoot, the worn planks cool under my soles. The sky stretched out forever, pale blue with streaks of pink still lingering at the edges. I looked out at the land. Endless earth, dry brush, fences that ran out past the hills like lines drawn by hand. There was something about it, harsh maybe, but honest. No expectations, no pretense, just open sky and quiet truth. I stood there, arms crossed over my chest, trying to imagine the world I was supposed to return to. An apartment full of boxes I hadn't unpacked. A job I didn't love, working for people who didn't see me. A city where I could walk a block and be surrounded by strangers, none of whom knew the boy I used to be. And yet, I'd been so sure I had to leave, that my life was out there somewhere, waiting. But now I wasn't so sure. My fingers curled into the sleeves of the borrowed shirt, and I closed my eyes. That's when it hit me, the memory. A letter. After graduation, in the week when I was supposed to be packing for college, I'd written him a letter. A messy, rambling thing on notebook paper, where I told him I was sorry, that I missed him, that I was ready to run, to leave everything behind if he'd just say the word. I never sent it. It stayed in the bottom of a drawer, yellowed and creased, like some relic from a different version of myself. And I'd convinced myself it wouldn't have made a difference. But maybe it would have. Maybe it still could. I turned, stepping back into the house. Inside, the stillness felt heavier now. He wasn't in the kitchen. I found him in the barn, brushing down a saddle, sleeves rolled, face calm. Too calm. He didn't look up when I walked in. Just kept brushing, slow and rhythmic. You always keep busy when something's bothering you, I said. He smirked, but didn't stop. Better than pacing holes in the porch. I wasn't pacing. You were thinking. I leaned against the post, arms folded. That obvious? He finally looked up. His eyes were warm, but guarded, like he was bracing himself for something. I didn't want to push, he said. Didn't want you to think I was trying to trap you here. You didn't, I said quietly. But you're still thinking about leaving. I admitted. But I don't know anymore. We stood in silence, the soft shuffle of the horse nearby the only sound between us. Then I asked the question I'd been circling all morning. What would staying even look like? He set the brush down gently and wiped his hands on a towel. For a long moment he said nothing, just stared out past the open barn doors to the stretch of land beyond. Then, simple. I waited. He turned back to me. It's not much. The ranch doesn't make a ton. But it's enough. I've got 3 horses, 2 goats that act like dogs, and enough repairs on this place to keep us busy till we're 80. He walked toward me, slow and steady. But there's room. For you. For us. We could build something here. Not fast. Not flashy. But real. His eyes held mine. You wouldn't have to hide. You'd never have to be lonely. My throat tightened. You'd want that? After all these years. He nodded, no hesitation. I've wanted that since you kissed me by the locker's sophomore year and then pretended it didn't happen. I laughed softly, despite the lump in my chest. I was scared. So was I. Still am. Sometimes. He stepped closer, now just inches away. But I'd rather be scared with you than live another year wondering what it could have been. I looked at him, really looked, and saw it all. The boy I'd loved, the man he'd become, the future he was offering me with both hands. And for the first time in a long time, something inside me stilled. Not because everything made sense. Not because I wasn't afraid. But because something about him, felt like home. My voice was quiet when I said it, but it didn't shake. Then I'm staying. His breath caught. You are. I nodded. I don't want to wonder anymore either. He reached for me, arms sliding around my waist, pulling me in close. His forehead pressed against mine, and I could feel his relief in the way he exhaled, like he'd been holding his breath since the moment I showed up on that desert road. I don't know what happens next, I whispered. We figure it out, he said. Together. I smiled. Like we always should have. Outside. The sun climbed higher, washing the barn in warm, golden light. And for once I wasn't running. I wasn't lost. I was exactly where I was meant to be. The days settled into a rhythm I didn't know I needed. It started with the sun. Always the sun. Climbing over the edge of the hills, bleeding gold into the dust and sky, painting the world in something softer than memory. I'd wake to the quiet sound of roosters crowing, the creak of the bed beneath us as I rolled over and found him there. Still asleep, one hand curled under the pillow, the other resting near mine like he'd been holding on in his dreams. We didn't speak much in the mornings. We didn't have to. There was something sacred in the silence, in the way coffee passed between our hands, in the glances that said good morning and I'm glad you're here without ever needing words. Ranch life wasn't easy. It never pretended to be, but it was real. We mended fences, mucked out stalls, hauled feed in the heat until sweat clung to our backs like second skin. And still, in all of it, there were moments, these quiet, golden moments, when his fingers would brush mine while handing over a tool or our boots would bump under the dinner table. We'd steal glances while hanging laundry, laugh over burnt toast, sit on the porch in the evenings with our legs stretched out, watching the sky catch fire before falling into night. There was peace in repetition, in the way each day folded into the next, not as a loop but a thread, a story being stitched together gently, honestly. We didn't talk about the past much anymore. Not because we'd forgotten it, but because we didn't need to hold it up like a wound anymore. It was there, sure, a part of us, but it wasn't the center. Not now. Now, it was about this, the life we were building one morning at a time. There was something about the way he moved beside me, steady, grounded, that made me feel like I was finally standing on something solid. Like I didn't have to run anymore. Like I didn't have to wonder whether love was a thing that came and went with youth. It wasn't. It was here, in dirty hands and sunburnt skin, in soft smiles across a dinner table, in the creak of the porch swing under a star-heavy sky. One afternoon, I found myself sweeping dust from the entryway when I looked down and saw them. Our boots. Side by side. Mine were newer. His worn and creased at the ankle but still sturdy. There was something quiet in that image. Something so simple it made my throat tighten. 2 pairs of boots. Lined up at the door like they'd always been there. Like this had always been home. That night, as we lay in bed, he reached for my hand without looking. Just found it, curled his fingers through mine, and held on. We didn't speak. We didn't need to. The wind rustled outside. The walls sighed, the world kept turning, and I realized something. I thought I was lost when I wandered into the desert, but maybe I just had to lose myself to find him again. What would you have done if you were in his boots, lost in the desert and suddenly reunited with your first love? Would you have stayed at the ranch or walked away to face the life you left behind? Tell me in the comments. I'd love to hear how you felt about their second chance at love.